So this video is going to be about my childhood and what led me up to where I am now.
Before Amberlynn Reid was an internet troll, an obese lol cow, and the main talking subject of dozens of reaction channels, she was just a vulnerable little girl whose parents failed to nurture, protect, and adequately love.
Amberlynn, look at Grandpa do no cooking.
I see those videos and I hear my mom say my name and my dad laughing, and it breaks my heart. I looked so happy. My parents sounded happy, and I literally just want to take that little girl and hold her and hug her, and in a way warn her that things are gonna get rough. Your life is gonna take a turn.
Welcome to part 3 of my series exploring the spectrum of hate against Amberlynn Reid. In part 1, I covered the extreme end of the spectrum, the major accusations, controversies, and scandals that drove some people to completely hate Amberlynn. In part 2, I covered her disastrous weight loss journey that left Amber 200 pounds heavier and her audience feeling gaslit, manipulated, and jaded. In this part, I'll be covering Amberlynn's traumatic childhood, which some people cite as the reason Amber deserves a little more grace than she gets, especially when it comes to her weight loss struggles. Amber herself has pointed to this trauma as the reason she developed an addiction to food and consequently became morbidly obese.
I was put into foster care at a very young age, and I turned to food and I became addicted to it, and it became my best friend. It became my go-to. It became my medicine. It made me feel good when I wasn't feeling good.
In October 1989, 14 months before Amber was born, her would-be father, George Reid, was arrested in California for growing marijuana, but he was let off with some community service and a fine. Then, April 1990, 8 months before Amber's birth, the state of California issued a warrant to arrest George for stealing property exceeding the value of $950, but he would not actually be arrested for nearly 2 years, possibly because he had relocated to a small island south of Florida, where his first daughter would be born shortly after Christmas.
I was born December 27, 1990 in Key West, Florida.
The originally proposed name for the baby was Mercedes Marie Reid, but George rejected it.
Your name is Amberlynn Reid. The story behind your name is I was supposed to be Mercedes Marie, but my dad didn't want me to have a car name. Amber Dawn was a dish soap. Yes, Amber Dawn was the second choice, and my dad didn't like either of them.
According to Amber, her mother Christine, who was 21 years old at the time of her birth, had been doing drugs while pregnant with her.
I was born on drugs. Can't talk. I was born on drugs. So we know my mom did drugs even before I was born.
Amber does not have any memories of her time in Key West.
I do not remember anything about there at all. I moved to California with my parents when I was just a baby, and I grew up in California.
I think this is when George appeared in court for the theft case in November 1991. In California, Amber lived very close to her father's side of the family, including her father's mom, Grandma Judy, who would become the light of Amber's formative years.
My grandma, I love her so much. She was like, I feel like I'm gonna get emotional. She was my mom when my mom couldn't be my mom, you know? She was everything to me.
Her mother's side of the family was estranged, and Amber would not meet or talk to them until the age of 17.
Okay, so for my whole life growing up, my mom had this like secret family. It was her mom and her sisters and sister. It was her stepdad. It was her actual dad. It was my first cousins. It was just all these people. And my mom had, you know, her stories of, oh, they don't want to be in my life, da 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 da. I don't even know where they're at. Like, social media wasn't a thing back then.
In 1992, Amber got a younger brother named Tony.
I was born in 1990. And then I lived for about a year and a half, and I had a brother named Tony come out of my mother.
During the early years of her life, Emma and her family bounced around different addresses in the Sonoma County area. Her earliest memory was living in a red house on a farm.
I used to live on a farm when I was super, super young. I had chickens, I had goats, snakes. We even had snakes. Yes, we had snakes. I've had so many animals, sheep, cows.
I think Amber lived at this farm when she was about 3, almost 4 years old. Because when I checked the Google Street View of the publicly listed address for her parents in 1994, it shows a large house next to a little red house, and on the other side of the road, there's a shed with old farming equipment and a horse. On Ask FM, Emma described life at the farm as being a lot of hard work, but she enjoyed it because they had their own mini zoo, which included 20 cats at some point.
When I was younger, I was a shorty, like I was probably 4. I was wearing this really big puffy 49ers jacket because my grandma loved 49ers. And this goose is charging after me. It ran me over. A goose. And this is on video. And I wish I had it so I could show you guys. It's honestly super funny. Like, I started running away, like screaming in my puffy, like 49ers jacket. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God. I started crying like an actual crazy. I loved the outdoors as a little girl. I was actually called the golden child because I was so tan.
Between age 4 and 5, Ember would have 3 food-related incidents. First, at age 4, she got a sore throat when she stole a sip of beer from her father's friend. Then in another incident, her life had to be saved by firefighters.
When I was 4, I choked on a lifesaver. Isn't that ironic? Because I heard that the lifesaver actually has a hole in the middle to prevent choking, and so you can still breathe when you choke on it, if you choke on it. But I did choke and I wasn't breathing, I couldn't talk, and my mom didn't know what to do, so she hurried up, called 911, and they showed up and thankfully saved my life. And they actually gave me a teddy bear with the firefighter like suit on the teddy bear, and I named the teddy bear Lifesaver, and I was in the newspaper because of that. Like, what?
I tried to verify this newspaper appearance, and this is the only thing that I found. A local newspaper called the Petaluma Gazette used to post logs of all the calls made to the police and fire departments. And in November 1995, when Ember would have been 4, just shy of 5, this call appeared in the paper with an address matching Ember's grandma's address at the time. It reads as follows: At 4:42 p.m., a 4-year-old girl was choking on the 400 block of Redacted Boulevard. She was not taken to the hospital. And then the final incident happened when she and her family had moved into an apartment complex where she got burned by a cup of noodles.
This might be one of my earliest memories, okay? And it has to do with a cup of noodle. So I'm like 4 years old. My mom's on the phone. We have one of these in the microwave. She's making it for me. It beeps, okay? Even as a 3 or 4 year old, like, I'm fat, like, I want my food. And she's just like, wait until I get off the phone, honey, okay? And I'm just like, devil horns, right? So I didn't listen to her. I went and got it, and we lived on the top floor of an apartment complex. The fact that I remember this so perfectly as if it was yesterday is mind-blowing, because there's a lot of like my past that I just like have completely blocked out. So I go to the microwave, okay? The kitchen obviously is not in sight, so she can't see me do this. I go get the cup of noodle, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so hot. So I'm like carefully walking. I decide to go outside, but it was too hot for me to walk down the stairs with. So I was like, oh my God, I don't want to spill it. So I sat at the top step, and I just am about to take my first bite, and I'm so excited. I'm like, yes, I'm rebelling against my mom. I'm about to get my food. Next thing I know, as soon as I was about to take a bite, from behind me, I hear my mom, Amberlynn Reid, I told you not to do that. Well, she scared the out of me, and it spilled all over my leg, and I got these burns that were like, it was big, like all over my leg, like these big bubbles, and just like, it was so bad. Is that called a 3rd-degree burn? It's like one of the worst burns you could get. Obviously I'm healed and better now, but every time I eat one of these, which has been often lately, it's just so easy to just eat one of these. I think about it every time. Every single time.
Then Amber and her family moved into a restaurant.
I was younger, like when I lived with my parents before I got into foster care, we lived in this really, like it was a pretty nice house. It was actually like a restaurant. That's a whole other thing.
I think they lived at the restaurant in 1996 because in the Press Democrat newspaper archives, I found these coupons for a Mexican restaurant with an address matching the one publicly listed for both of Amber's parents in 1996. Her father was also running a sketchy lawnmower business.
I'm actually about to just have some of these hot tamales. I used to eat these as a little girl. Let's do like a random little story time. So my dad, when I was younger, when I lived with him, my dad had his own lawnmower shop. Like he had his own business. A lot of sketchy things have happened there. Things that I remember, things that my mom have recently reminded me about. Girl, maybe we could share some of those stories some other time. But I loved going there, and I would sit in a little like office thing, and when someone would come up, I'd be like, okay, let me go get my dad. There is distinct fun things I do remember. One of them is we had this like huge Popeye machine that we actually had in like the lobby. So I play that a lot. And then we had like this little like candy machine, and I would always eat the hot tamales out of there.
She and her father would frequent the waste dumping site to find parts for her father's lawn shop.
And when my dad went to the dumps, I had to go with him. I don't know why. It was just one of those things that I loved doing. Thinking about it now, I'm like, I don't think I'd ever go to such a place. But, we went to the dumps, you know, we spent some time there. My dad had to unload stuff, and I went to go look at knickknacks. I mean, I was so young. My dad probably went a good once a month. And what he liked doing at the dumps is why we did go so long, or so many times. He didn't always put trash at the dump. Sometimes he went and bought parts for like lawnmowers and stuff because he was a mechanic. And everyone's garbage of a lawnmower or parts like that, he could turn into treasure. That was just his thing.
Despite all the moving, Amber remembers this period in her life with fondness. She was a happy child who participated in Easter egg hunts, opened Christmas gifts, and even won a Halloween costume contest at age 5.
Favorite memory from childhood? I don't remember a lot from when I was younger. I feel like a lot of stuff I kind of just told myself to forget. So I subconsciously did forget, which is kind of frightening because it's like, what did I forget? Like, what is this big gap? Why don't I remember everything? But there are a few things that my parents did video and I have seen. And one of the funniest things for me, it's funny now, is every time I would go Easter egg hunting when I was like 5, I would, oh my God, I don't even want to say this. I would pick up a green egg and I would lick it thinking it would taste like grape. I'd pick up a red egg, lick it thinking it would taste like a strawberry, etc., etc., so on and so forth. It's so fucking embarrassing. This is another food one, but it's funny, and my dad thinks it's really funny. So I was 5, 6, 7, like I'm so bad with time frames, but it was definitely around that time, and it was actually the night before Thanksgiving, and what my family used to do is my grandma would cook the turkey while we were sleeping, and she would constantly check it. Obviously, like, we don't want a fire or anything, but oh my God, this is so embarrassing. He just thinks it's so funny. I slept, I can't even say it. I slept in front of the oven, and I said, Dad, I'm gonna guard the big chicken. What? Oh my God, it's so embarrassing. Like, I'm gonna guard the big chicken? Like, what? As you can clearly tell, I am obese. I have struggled with my weight literally from the time I could eat real food, like soft food, not just formula. Instead of giving me baby food, I remember my parents telling me that my grandma actually gave me like her mashed potatoes, and I fell in love with mashed potatoes at a very young age, probably younger than I should have. So it's just little things like that that led me to become morbidly obese. When I was 5, I actually dressed up as a Dalmatian for Halloween, and I was in a Halloween costume contest, and I won first place, and I was in the newspaper from it.
In the newspaper archives, I could not find the announcement of the costume contest winners for 1995 or 1996. Then, I could not establish exactly when in this timeline, but Amber's father got hospitalized for an extended period of time.
My dad, when I was younger, when I was living with him, he got very sick. Very, very sick, and I thought I was gonna lose him. I was very young at the time, and I couldn't quite understand it or grasp onto what was happening. It was to the point of he lost his hearing for a little bit. I still don't understand it at all, what happened. But he was in the hospital for a very, very, very long time.
By the end of 1996, Amber and her family were living in a trailer park.
Before I was put into foster care, I lived with my parents for most of my years inside of a trailer. It was a trailer park that I became very accustomed to. I knew probably everybody in that trailer park. I'm not ashamed to say that I lived a lot of my life in that trailer. It was run down, it was moldy, it was beat, it was just, to be honest, it was gross. I'm surprised people even came over to visit and be my friend.
Please be advised that this next section mentions substance use. If you're sensitive to that topic, please skip to the timestamp on screen. And it was around this time that Amber would become aware of her parents' drug problems.
But as I got older, I started realizing more so that my parents weren't like normal parents. Their location of using drugs was in the bathroom. So every time I'd go in there, I knew that when they came out, they'd be a different person.
They did like every drug imaginable. They would go in the bathroom. That is where they would do their drug of choice, and they'd be in there for hours and hours and hours a day. When they would leave that bathroom, I don't know if they were gonna be like super hyper, I want to clean everything, oh my god, I talk so fast, I'm gonna be up for like 3 days. I didn't know if they were gonna be out screaming at me for every little thing ever, slamming things, throwing things, breaking each other's bones. I didn't know if they were gonna come out like unable to even speak, loaded out of their brains, like can't even function. They think a backpack is a dog. So I never knew what was gonna happen. There, more times than none, they would come out loaded. They would be sweaty, itchy. They wouldn't be able to like do anything without nodding out. It was traumatizing as a little girl, hard to go through, hard to watch, hard to see. I'm currently wearing an apron. I guess it's like a Breaking Bad apron, and I only watched one episode of Breaking Bad. I really just didn't, I don't know, the show rubbed me wrong. I think it's mainly because I grew up with drug addict parents, and like they did meth. Like I smelt it all throughout the house every single day.
In addition to drugs, her parents had also developed a gambling habit.
Love me a scratch off moment. This reminds me of when I lived with my parents. Like they did drugs, so they didn't think clearly. They were obsessed with scratchers, and my dad had his own lawnmower shop, and in the back there was like this room where they would do the drugs at. On the wall, literally, they made it to where they, like, you couldn't see the walls. It was just nothing but scratch offs. Weirdest thing in the world. Random fact though.
At this time, Amber was in kindergarten. Her parents would send her to school unclean, and she ended up with a persistent cycle of head lice.
When I was in kindergarten, I had lice so freaking bad. It lasted months and months. My parents constantly tried to, you know, get it out of my hair. And every single time that I would go back to school because they thought I had no more lice, they'd send me back home because I had it. And I ended up having to cut my hair in a bob. And my hair was pretty long, and I never really took care of it, neither did my parents, and I would form really big knots in my hair, and obviously I was a little girl and didn't enjoy the pain of it being brushed. So with the mixture of that and the fact that I got lice, that was extremely horrible, and my parents didn't know how to get rid of it. Like, they did the whole shampoo treatment, comb treatment over and over, and for some reason I just kept getting it. And thinking back now, it's probably because, you know, we didn't clean the bedding, we didn't clean my clothing, we didn't anything of that nature. So I had lice for months.
I'm not sure if this had anything to do with Amber's performance, but her school tried to get her to repeat kindergarten.
And another little tidbit about me is that I was supposed to be held back in kindergarten. My dad literally did not let it happen. Like, he did everything in his power not to let it happen. So thank the Jeebus.
So Amber moved on to first grade. Even this early in her life, her weight was already causing her problems. In the first grade, she had to be out of school for a while when she got bedridden from an ankle injury.
I was huffing and puffing over to my bike, and it was nighttime. I tripped over my bike, literally tripped over my bike with the heels on. From then on, I was like in the worst pain. I had no idea what was happening. I think I was like in shock for a minute, and I was so, like, as a little girl, I was a strong fucking bitch because I did not let out a single cry. I hopped back onto my bicycle and I drove back home. I'm pedaling with one foot. Please tell me how that's possible. I am pedaling with one foot. As soon as I get in front of our trailer, I drop my bike and I drop my body and I scream. You see my grandma and my mom run down the porch faster than I've ever seen anything in my whole life, and they're like, what is wrong? And I am bawling. I'm like, I fell. And I'm only wearing one shoe, might I add. The ankle that broke, I don't have that shoe on no more. And they take one look at it and they're like, take her to the hospital. My grandma goes and gets her Cadillac car. My dad comes down, and they all end up taking me to the emergency room. And long story short, I was not in the waiting room for long because it was very serious. It hurt a lot. They did x-rays, and it took forever. They were like putting this cast on me that took a really long time because it was one of those white ones where they like stick it and then they just keep sticking it, blah, blah, blah. And they said, you're not going to be able to walk on this for so and so long. And they're like, we're going to get you some crutches. This part actually kind of is really embarrassing. Like I said, no judgment zone. I was fat as a little girl. Even then, I've always been pretty chunky. I couldn't use the crunches. I couldn't use the crutches. Even as a little girl, I couldn't hold myself up to hop on one leg with crutches. That's ridiculous. I probably couldn't do it now either, but the fact that I couldn't do that in first grade, there's something wrong there. They didn't offer me a wheelchair because we lived in a trailer and I wouldn't have been able to maneuver anywhere. Like, I physically wouldn't be able to. So I had to be bedridden pretty much. And, you know, my parents did help me walk here and there. I don't remember much after all of that happened. I was pretty traumatized about the whole situation.
Please be advised that this next section mentions domestic abuse. If you're sensitive to that topic, please skip to the timestamp on screen. Now at this point, it was not just drugs that were a problem with her parents. Her father would also beat her mother. Whenever this would happen, Grandma Judy would distract Amber with little activities.
I saw my dad hit my mom more times than I can even count. When I was like really young, living with my parents and traumatic things were happening, my grandma, who I love dearly, she would try to protect me from all that and distract me in the best way that she knew how. So she would take a piece of paper. This was like when I was literally 5. She would take a piece of paper and like squiggle all over it and then have me color it just like this. And she would tell me to color them in.
There's a court record from October 1998 in which Amber's mom filed a restraining order against George and petitioned the court for the dissolution of their marriage and child support. At this time, Amber's mother was pregnant with their 3rd child. However, the separation didn't last very long because Christine and George would end up back together. According to Amber, her father's abuse wasn't just limited to her mother.
As a little girl, my dad would push me into a corner and he would spit loogies in my face, calling me every fat name that I could even think of imaginable. It was probably the hardest for me hearing it come from my dad. I almost expected it from kids at school, but not from my own father.
As George was terrorizing the family at home, Amber was becoming a menace to other children at school. Someone on Ask FM asked Amber about the meanest thing she'd ever done, and she replied, "I bullied a girl in the bathroom when I was in 2nd grade. She was probably in kindergarten. It was nothing too extreme, besides that I broke her glasses." And in another post she said, "I bullied a little girl when I was 7 and purposely broke her glasses." As George and Christine were spending more and more money on drugs, they would only buy food sporadically, and Amber would steal other kids' lunchboxes at school.
In elementary school, I used to steal kids' lunchbox when they were on the side of the thing when we were at recess.
Yeah.
I was
Somebody
like,
stole my lunch one time and I was really
it was
upset.
probably me. I was like 6, 7.
It was sad.
I didn't have food. When I was like younger, before I was put in foster care, and like I only had one pair of pants. Like my dad would have rather spent money on getting high in whatever form that he wanted than buy his own kids like clothing and stuff. And that also goes with like food and this and that. But like when I finally did have food, or it was like a standard meal, it was really unhealthy, and I would eat a lot and I would sneak any sort of food that I could.
In 2nd grade, Amber also got in trouble for inappropriate sexual advances towards another little girl.
I was in 2nd grade, and on a sticky note, oh my god, I could not believe I'm about to, oh, I hate this game. This gets me in trouble. So on a sticky note, I wrote in 2nd grade, I wrote, "Will you have sex with me?" And I was going to give it to my friend who was coming to my house that day. Long story short, I accidentally dropped the note under my chair. My teacher found it. She knew it was mine based on handwriting, where she found it within the location. And I got sent home. My parents obviously found out what happened, and I got in really big trouble. And by the way, my friend was a girl.
Please be advised that this next section mentions sexual assault. If you're sensitive to that topic, please skip to the timestamp on screen. According to the Alaska Department of Family and Community Services, signs of sexual abuse in children aged 2 to 9 years old include trying to initiate sex with other children, bedwetting, trouble sleeping, and violent behavior towards other children.
When I was younger, I peed myself until I was 11. And obviously, you know, I saw a therapist about it, and she said it's because I was afraid to sleep. So when I was sleeping, I was scared to sleep. And that's a lot of the reason why I stay up all night. Like, I try to explain that to Becky.
In 2014, Amber shared on Ask FM that when she was 6 or 7 years old, she was molested by a female cousin who lived with them at the time. I will revisit this story when Amber gets older, but for now, 7-year-old Amber kept this incident a secret.
I was molested by my cousin when I was 7 years old, and I did not tell my mom till I was 12.
During the summer, George would give his kids a break from their increasingly toxic home life by taking them camping.
While living with my parents, we would go camping, and we would go every summer for my brother's birthday, because my brother's birthday is June 21st. And to me, yes, there is some negatives in all of these situations. I feel like this is why it's hard talking about my childhood, because it wasn't the greatest, but that's okay. Anyways, camping was fun to me because it was a different place to be. My dad, he would go fishing, and he knew how to like gut a fish. We would catch crawdads together. I love doing that. The place we would go camping had a little like beach moment, so we'd like swim in the water, and you know, me and my brother would bring bikes and we would ride our bikes around. I remember just thinking it was so cool because my dad would put us in the back of the truck, and we'd be able to lay in the back of the truck while we went through like windy roads and like in the camp area. It was a big popular camp place, so it was a lot of fun.
On Christmas Day in 1998, Amber found out that Santa is not real when her mother went into labor and gave birth to her new baby brother, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was 8 when this happened. 8 or 9. Nope, I think I was 9. Oh my god, I'm getting confused. I was 8. Oh, one of the two. I should know this because this was the time when I knew what was up. Okay, and this is actually a beautiful story, at least to me it is, and it's kind of sad, but let's get into this. My mom was pregnant. She got pregnant 9 months before December 25th, if you will. And for me, what I did every single Christmas, I would sleep in the living room after I put out the cookies and the milk for Santa, because I wanted to see Santa. I wanted to see his big red bag. I wanted to see his beard. I wanted to see, you know, his elf that he came with, if he came with one. I wanted to hear the jingle bells on my roof, and I wanted to see his reindeers and his sleigh and the whole thing, and I never got to see that. But I always was in the living room waiting for that moment. And my aunt, which I actually called Nani, she's in heaven now, love you. My Nani would always tell me every single year Santa would kiss my forehead in hopes that I would wake up. That story just already makes me a little misty inside, because I do miss her so much. And it was just it was a cute like tradition she had for me, because she was always involved in Christmas with us. I wouldn't say always, but most of the time she was. So yeah, he would always kiss my forehead, and she'd always say I missed him and stuff like that. But one fine Christmas morning, when Santa was supposed to be putting out my gifts, I'm in the living room and my mom starts screaming and crying in the living room right next to the Christmas tree, and she is freaking out, and I'm just laying in my, like with my blanket like this, because I don't want to get depressing. I really wanted this video to be kind of like chipper and like a cute little story, but I was kind of used to that. My parents arguing all the time, and my mom screaming, my dad screaming, them yelling and breaking stuff. I was kind of used to that, and my go-to was either to scream back or to hide from it. And at that point, I was just hiding. I didn't know what was happening. So when she started screaming and stuff, and she's like, oh, my water broke, and she was like freaking out. And as a little girl, I had no idea what that meant. Like, I thought maybe she dropped her glass of water and it broke. Like, I had no idea what she was talking about. And these words, I will never forget these words, because as a little girl, I was very, very angry. She said, I was putting the Santa gifts out and my water broke, George. George is my dad's name, might I add. Everyone freaks out. I freak out. I'm up and I'm like, what? I'm having a brother? Like, it was a whole thing. And then I was like, Santa gifts. That's all I could think in my head. And then I was like, but my brother is coming. And it was like this whole thing. But that is how I found out, because my mom was putting Santa's gifts out. Santa's gifts. Her gifts, girl. Her gifts, because there is no freaking Santa. And that is how I found out. To me, I think that's a cute story. As for my brother, he was born December 25th. His name is Jonathan James.
After Jonathan's birth, George and Christine continued to do drugs. And whenever they were high, Amber would have to look after Jonathan. One day, little Jonathan almost died alone in his crib.
So, when my brother was born, he was so adorable, and gosh, I loved him. As days went on, I did kind of take the role of being a parent in a way. I still remember one time in particular when my parents were on so many drugs that they were like passed out. My baby brother was crying, and I wasn't sure why, so I went into the room of where they were, and it was because his crib was by a curtain, and the curtain string was wrapped around his neck. I will never forget that day as long as I live. Even now it's emotional for me. His face was purple, he was screaming, crying, and to put it shortly, I had to save his life, and I did. And Then I realized that I don't think my parents will ever change. I was a 9-year-old and I was taking on the role of being a mother.
Amber's mom may have been unable to give up drugs for her new baby, but she did get rid of Amber's dog because she didn't think it was good for the baby.
But the first animal that I know from my head that I loved, that like I felt physical love for, was Zeus. He was a black dog. I don't remember what kind of dog, but I had him from a puppy, and I think I got him when I was like, how old was I? 7. And my mom actually had to get rid of him when I was 9, because she ended up having another baby, and she doesn't like having animals with babies. I don't know. It was a weird concept. As a 9-year-old, I kind of just went with it. But I remember that breaking my heart more than anything in the world.
In the midst of all this sadness, I could not establish exactly when, but Amber's aunt suddenly passed away in the middle of the day.
At the end of the trailer park, there was a pool that me and my brother really liked to swim in. And one day we heard the ambulance and I got a really sick feeling. And I don't know why, because there was a lot of people living in that trailer park, probably about 200 people. So the ambulance could have been for anybody. But I looked at my brother and I looked at my grandma and I said, that is my aunt. Like I got really scared. Like I almost felt it in the pit of my stomach. And I got out of the water and they followed me and they thought I was like huffing and puffing for no reason. And it turned out that my aunt actually died that day and the ambulance was for her. Still this day, no one knows how or why she died.
Please be advised that this next section mentions domestic abuse. If you're sensitive to that topic, please skip to the timestamp on screen. When Amber was 9 years old, just shy of 10, her father's domestic violence made it into the newspaper, along with the threat to kill his children. On October 18, 2000, the Petaluma Courier posted this article. George James Reid, age 35, allegedly punched his female partner, pulled her hair, and threw a frozen juice can at her leg during an argument in the couple's mobile home on Redacted Boulevard. Reid also threatened to kill the woman and the other people who were also in the mobile home at the time. When officers came to the mobile home park to break up the fight, Reid allegedly struggled with them, elbowing Officer Todd in the face and punching Officer Dan Miller in the face. The officers wrestled Reid to the ground, handcuffed him, and took him to jail. Officer Hart suffered a minor injury that did not require treatment. At 4:45 p.m., when Reid was set to be released on bail, Petaluma police learned that he had allegedly telephoned the victim from jail and threatened to kill her, the other witnesses, and the couple's children. So they rearrested him on new charges of terrorist threats and violation of a court order. I think this incident is what triggered the investigation and subsequent decision to take Amber and her brothers away from her parents. On Ask FM, Amber was asked why they were taken into foster care, and she replied, "For the longest time, my dad was extremely violent when it came to my mother. He also broke a lot of furniture with his violence. He yelled and became like a monster. Drugs really took over my parents. They did not pay attention to us kids. As a little girl, I did not even know the proper way to shower because they never taught me. I skipped a lot of school. Just everything was wrong. I peed my bed all the way up until I was 12 years old every single night."
One of the reasons why I was taken from my parents is neglect. And that comes with all forms.
Amber was sitting in her 4th grade class when she found out that she would not be going home for a very long time.
So one day when I was at school, I think 3rd or 4th grade, I got a call to the office. There were police there and I wasn't sure what was really happening, and come to find out, I was being put into foster care. And they also called in my brother. So at the time I had 2 brothers. I had a brother who is a year younger than me, so he was going to the same elementary school as I was, so that's why he was also called into the office. And then I had a baby brother who was about 1 year old, maybe a little younger than that. So me and my brother get put in this cop car. I don't remember many things being explained at that point, but we were put in the cop car, and next I know,
we have my little brother. I don't remember how we got him, because I know we didn't go by obviously our home, which was a trailer, rundown, moldy, holy fested, just disgusting trailer. Like that's putting it lightly. Like the dirtiest thing you can imagine that like 20 times more. Wow, okay. So we're in the cop car and we have me and my brothers, and next thing you know, we come to this like huge house and my baby brother's getting taken. It was so sad. I remember a woman with short hair standing at the doorway. Me and my brother were allowed to go and say bye. I was so like confused. I remember a lot of tears. My brother didn't really cry. I think he was more so just like shocked by what was happening. And then they end up taking us to the police station, where I just remember sitting there for hours. And I think they tried to explain to us what was happening, how they're gonna take us to a children's shelter, how my baby brother was in like this foster home. I guess the children's shelter didn't take babies. I think like the youngest that they took was maybe like 4 or 5 from what I remember. And I was sitting here like 8 or 9. My brother was a year younger than I was. We're sitting at this police station. I honestly don't know why.
Amber and Tony were dropped off at a children's shelter, which is a facility that houses all children after they've been removed from their homes while trying to find a foster family or adoptive parents.
And then we get dropped off at this big building where we see like all these random staff, and they're like asking us questions. Like there's so many questions and so much paperwork. I'm like, me and my brother are young. Why are you asking us? Like it was just so traumatic. Like we just got taken from my parents, and I'm over here like bawling my eyes out. My brother's just like traumatic, like stone cold face. And then they separate us because boy hall and girl hall was obviously separated. Preteens and teens did come together like during the day, but when it came to like showers and like bedrooms, obviously the boys and girls were separated. So when me and my brother were separated, I thought I was never gonna see him again. Like I was so scared. But what they did was they had this like sheet, this paper of like someone's body, and I had to, I don't know like what my brother went through. I'm pretty sure he had to go through the same thing. I had to get completely naked in the shower. They had to look all over my body. They had to write down if I had any marks anywhere, etc., etc. And now that I think about it now, it seems very weird. I feel like as the woman that I am now, I would have declined. But I feel like if I would have declined, I would have gotten in trouble, because while living in the children's shelter, like you had to do everything that you're told to do. They had like a point system, and you got points for doing what they told you to do. And then if you declined, you got like negative points, which put you in a negative, like you didn't get to do like games or go on outings and stuff like that. It was like a P+, P- system. Privilege plus means that you got the right amount of points that day and you got to do all the good things. P- means your privilege negative, which means you don't get to do the fun stuff or anything like that. Which, what? Every day we lived our life based off of these points. Like that's what we were as human beings, was just point system. So after they checked my body and all that, I had to shower. They found that I had head lice. Obviously I had head lice. I had head lice for a majority of my childhood, until I went to the children's shelter and they did the craziest like thing to my hair that I have not had. I have stutters. I have not had head lice since then. And when I tell you, my parents tried to get rid of my head lice multiple times and it never worked, I haven't had it since then. So whatever they did, it worked. Love that for them. So after I took the shower, they did the head lice treatment. It was actually dinner time by that point, and that's when I got to meet all of the other kids.
Shortly after getting into foster care, Amber got diagnosed with depression and started treatment.
I was diagnosed with depression at the age of 9 years old. That was when I first got put into foster care.
I was put on Prozac. No 9-year-old should be that you know, to be diagnosed with depression. Like 9-year-olds should be out skipping and jumping and just having the time of their lives. But I wasn't. The complete opposite, really. Prozac did not work for me. So a couple years later, which they finally cared and finally realized, they put me on Wellbutrin, which it actually helped.
During her time at the children's shelter, Amber found her love for writing.
Now we're playing Uno. I'm always the shuffler and dealer because I am a pro at it. I taught myself at a children's shelter how to shuffle all by myself because I had nothing else to do when I was like 10 years old. So that's what I taught myself to do. And you know what else I would do? I would literally sit there and I would get chapter books and I would get paper and I would rewrite the books.
Just for fun?
I had nothing else to do. That was literally, I think that's why I can write so many different ways. Because like I would practice like several different ways of writing at such a young age.
After spending a while at the children's shelter, Amber and Tony were placed in their first foster family. This is how Amber described this experience on Ask.fm. The first foster parents I've ever had were Nancy and Jerry. Their granddaughter lived with them, and they had one younger boy who was a foster child as well, besides my brother and I. My brother told me that Jerry would ask him perverted questions about his manhood while taking a bath. My brother was only about 7 or 8 then, mind you. I hate them. To get rid of us for God knows why, they lied and said they were going on a vacation and needed to drop us off at the shelter. Weeks went by and I never heard from them again. People are sick. A year after being taken from home, Amber found out that her baby brother Jonathan was being adopted and she would never see him again.
After being in foster care for over a year, I was actually in a children's shelter for longer than that. I found out that my brother was actually going to be an adopted child. He was going to be put in closed adoption, which meant I would never be allowed to see him again. It broke my heart, and it still does. And it happened 12 years ago. In a way, I felt like my own child was being adopted.
Amber also suffered another loss when she received a call from her grandma telling her that her best friend and crush from the trailer park had moved away.
And I remember getting a call when I was at the children's shelter. It was actually, I think my grandma was the one who called. I'm pretty sure, because we were allowed to have one phone call a day. It was very rare that I got phone calls. Who knows why? Doesn't even matter at this point. But my grandma called and she said that Kay had moved away to Tennessee. As a 9-year-old, I felt like my soul left my body. I cried so hard and I cried for weeks because as a 9-year-old, Tennessee is a whole different planet, you know?
At this point, Emma had learned to use food as a coping mechanism. On Ask.fm, she confessed that she would steal food from every foster family that she lived in.
I would sneak any sort of food that I could, especially once I got into group homes and foster homes and stuff. I would steal food. Sometimes money has nothing to do with being bigger at all, because all the foster homes I was ever in, group homes, that's not a money heavy place. It's always been very poor, low income place. And that's how I grew up. That's based on my experiences.
I remember myself going, stealing food from my group home and sneaking it into the bathroom and just eating it. And that was at the age of 10. I did the same thing in a lot of foster homes.
After getting abandoned by the first family, Amber and Tony were placed with a second family, but this relationship would quickly sour when Amber ended up in a physical altercation with her foster mother. Here's how she recounted the experience on Ask.fm. My foster mom was a single mother. Her name was Kim. She lived with a 14-year-old daughter. She also had a 20-year-old roommate who had a toddler. I don't remember much besides that Kim was a complete health freak, and I was afraid to sleep because I swear the house was haunted. Her and I bumped heads a lot. One night, she pushed me on the stairs, so I swiped her computer off the table. Then I called my social worker and left my brother behind because he did not want to leave. That's when my brother and I got separated. After the incident with her second foster home, Amber was put in a group home. According to the California Department of Social Services, group homes provided the most restrictive out-of-home placement for children in foster care. They were the option for children with significant emotional or behavioral problems who required more restrictive environments.
I was even in a group home for 2 years when I was 10 and 11. That was when I was separated from my brother, and nothing was working out.
Amber's life may have been miserable at home, but like many children, she held this unconditional love for her parents. So suddenly being ripped away from them and everything she knew was an isolating and traumatizing experience.
It was when I did Girl Scouts and I ate a whole box of cookies in my closet. I was in an all-girls group home at the time, and I was supposed to give the Girl Scout cookies over to the person who bought them, but I was 10 years old, crying in my closet, eating all of them. And I remember the way I felt eating those cookies. I remember why I was doing it. I missed my parents a lot. I remember I hadn't seen them in a while. I didn't know where my brother was. And because we were separated at that point, because I went to the group home, and I felt scared. I was terrified. And I felt like no one understood. I was lonely. And that's the only thing I knew to do to like numb that feeling, those feelings and those thoughts, was to eat. So teaching myself to do that at such a young age, no matter what I did, I couldn't unlearn it.
Meanwhile, at home, Amber's mother fell pregnant and decided to go to jail to get sober.
My mom then proceeded to get pregnant when I was 10, and she...
Had James.
This story's crazy, but she went to jail just to be sober. She like purposely got herself in trouble just to go to jail to be sober so she could give birth to my baby brother, her son, while she was sober.
Her mother's record shows that she was charged for vandalizing property in March 2001. Christine gave birth to Amber's third baby brother, James Williams Reid, and Amber would get to hold him once during a visitation with her parents. Soon after that, baby James was put into closed adoption, and this is a poem that Amber dedicated to him.
The poem that I wrote about my baby brother, who I only got to meet one time. And through all the years of being alive, because I'm 32, I have been able to keep that poem. So I want to show you the picture. I also want to read you the poem. The poem is not that good. Remember, I was 15, okay? But it was special and important to me, and I really want to open up a little bit more and show it. You're out there under the same moon. We placed our feet on the same gravel. I met you once and held you tight. I think of the sadness of my last goodbye. You looked at me with baby eyes. Oblivious to your future versus mine, our mom made the choice while I suffer the consequence. Although I saw everything we could be, our mom made the choice and set you free. A brother I will love forever, who will never love me.
In addition to the home changes, Amber was also transferring between different elementary schools, and as a result, she developed gaps in her education.
Oh, the issues with math. The whole time when I was in elementary school, like I was being bounced back and forth, like with foster homes and, you know, things like that. So I skipped a lot of school because, like, I would go to several different schools and they'd be like teaching something I already knew, or I'd go to one school where they completely bypassed stuff I didn't know, so they weren't teaching it and whatnot. So when it came to like math and history and geography and stuff, like literally I knew nothing. I was dumb. Dumb.
On Ask FM, somebody asked Amber why she wasn't placed with family members, and she said at one point she and her brother were placed with her aunt and uncle, but they turned out to be marijuana users too. The group home was a mixed bag of memories for Amber. First, she had her first kiss with a girl during an outing.
Who was your first kiss? See, when I was little, like 4, I kissed a few little other 4-year-olds, and I don't know if I want to consider those like my first kisses, because is that even real? So I'm gonna use a different experience, different day. My first kiss was Shiana. She's a girl, and it was when I was 10 or 11. We were at I was in a group home at the time, and she lived in the group home with me. She was 12 and I was like 10 or 11. And we were at a like water slide amusement park called Outrageous Waters, and we were on the lazy river, and there was like this really pretty bridge, and she's like, come here, come here, come here. And I'm like, okay. And we were like, sorry, it's almost flying in my face. And she wanted to go under the bridge, and she just kissed me. There was no tongue. There was nothing like that. So just like a little peck. So that's my first kiss.
Then I'm not sure if it is the same girl or a different one, but Amber is reported to the group home staff for writing a romantic letter to a girl she assumed to be her girlfriend.
I was actually in a group home, and my first relationship was with a girl. I was 10, 11, around there, and I actually still talk to this girl. And she was like the first person that I ever considered like my girlfriend. And it was weird though, because she said that she liked me and I liked her, and whatever, we were like girlfriends. And I remember writing her this note like saying, oh, I like you so much, like I remember it so well. And then she showed it to a staff member, which I thought was really weird. And I ended up getting in trouble, and the whole thing was super confusing. I don't know why she like told on me for the letter when I thought we were girlfriends. I don't even know. Like, it was a weird situation. We were both super young. I don't know what was occurring. And I was actually very hurt. And since I was so young, I didn't really deal with it. I kind of just like got over it.
When Amber is not sneaking food and binging in secret, she remembers being force-fed by the staff on one of the most memorable days in American history.
What was I doing during 9/11? I was in 5th grade. I was in an all-girls group home. I was being forced to eat strawberry yogurt, and it was making me gag, but we couldn't get up off the table until we finished all our food, so I was being forced. And they had the news going in the living room, and where I sat at the kitchen table, I could see the TV. I looked over, and then all of a sudden, I saw buildings blow up. And as a little girl, I was like confused, so they had to explain it to me, but I remember, like, literally, I remember it like it was yesterday. Okay, so in 5th grade, I had the biggest crush on this kid named Mike. Like, oh, damn baby, hello. And every lunch, I had to walk about, because how we did it is everyone had to throw away their lunch in like a certain order. Mm-hmm. So I tried to look fly every day. Okay, because I had to walk past him every day.
Did you get that shake on?
I tried.
Oh, yeah.
So I tried wearing these sandals that were like on point. Okay, they were really pretty. I know sandals, that sounds really stupid, but for a 5th grader, they were pretty. Okay. And I think someone like spilt juice or something right in front of him on my ass. I go to get up right in front of him on my ass, and this happened like 4 times in a row. I ended up crawling towards the trash can to help myself up. And it's like, not only was it in front of him, but it was in front of like everybody, and it was really embarrassing. A girl puked on me in 5th grade. She had blueberries for breakfast. I was in 5th grade, and I was in the nurse's office, and for some reason she closed the door and she said, I'll be right back. And she's like, don't move, you know, and I was being like a good little student like I was. Not. And so I was standing there, and I had to pee so bad. I just felt it on the tip of my little pee hole. TMI yet again. And like, I literally was trying everything I could to not pee and to not move like she told me to. And then I peed in the nurse's office all over myself. And I was in a group home at the time. I ended up like crying in the bathroom finally when I left. Like, I left after I peed my pants, so the nurse didn't see it. So shouldn't I just went to the bathroom first? Probably makes more sense. But yeah, that was really embarrassing. And after I went to the bathroom and cried, I ended up going to the office and admitting the situation. They had to call my group home staff. They came and brought me some clothes, but I was like, no, take me back home.
When Ember was 11, her father got sober and made a concerted effort to rebuild his relationship with his children.
And that was when I was around like 11. I was living in an all-girls group home. And I think at the time, my dad was doing really well in his sobriety, and he would come visit me. And I lived actually in Upper Lake, California at the time. So my dad, he would rent out boats, and we would go on the boat and we would go fishing. And those are the memories. Sorry. Whoa. Okay. Those are the memories that I like to remember.
So this is actually my dad. This is my brother, Tony, and this is me. I was probably 10 or 11 at the time. So as you can tell, I have always been fat. I was actually 290 pounds around this time.
During this time, Ember was also involved in a number of extracurricular activities, including a soccer team, and George would attend her games.
I was in a group home at the time, and my dad and my aunt, who's now in heaven, and my grandma, who's now in heaven, all three of them would come and visit me during the days where I had soccer, and it was awesome. I remember we were the blue team. I forgot what we were called, though.
When Ember got her first period, her parents brought over a cake.
I saw this photo of me. This is from when I was 11. I was in foster care. I was visiting my parents. This is a little room that we used to be in to visit once a week.
Georgia and Christine's efforts worked. When Ember was about 12 years old, the court allowed her and her brother to move back in with their parents for a 6 months test period. This would prove to be a mistake.
When I turned 12, my parents finally decided to get their act together, and we went to court and we had a 6-month trial to live with them. And that trial turned into 2 years.
I was still like a ward of the state. My parents had a trial to see if they were fit to be parents. No, they weren't. My parents were able to fake it and say that they were sober, better, improved, they had jobs, etc., etc. So me and my brother got to live with our parents as what they called a trial. And that trial was not successful. Things actually got worse and things got bad.
For her 12th birthday, Amber's dad got her a nose piercing.
My nose piercing happened when I was 12. I really wanted my nose pierced when I was 11. It was really weird. I wanted it so bad. I was at like this time trial with my parents, so I was still under the law, like in foster care, but I had 6 months to live with my parents to see if like they changed and if they were better. And so while I was living with them, I was like, oh my god, I want my nose pierced so bad. And like my mom and my dad both like kept saying no. And I was like, please, it's just a nose piercing. Like I'd beg them. And my 12th birthday was coming up, and my dad's like, okay, let's go somewhere. Like, I didn't know where we were going at all, and my mom wasn't anywhere around. I remember I had 2 friends, Nico and Andre. They were, I don't know, they were guys that were like 3 years older than I was, but we were all really good friends. And they came with us, and then like halfway there, my dad's like, we're gonna go get your nose pierced, don't tell your mom. I was like, what? Like, I was literally shocked. Like, I couldn't believe it, because like the first time I dyed my hair, my dad freaked out. Like, I dyed my hair so young. I think I was like 11. I dyed like the tips of my hair pink, but that's a whole other subject all in itself. But I was really shocked, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, I'm so excited. And then I got really nervous for some reason. We showed up at the place, and the guy was like, your nose is kind of small, because at the time my nose really was small. Like, I just have like a small nose for my face. And he was like, are you sure you want to get it done? You're still really young. And I'm like, yes, I do. Like, don't try to change my dad's mind. Like, hello. So, when the time was coming, he had to like put this, it was like this gray, it was a metal tube pretty much. Like, he put it up my nose, and I was like so confused. And my dad's like, what is that? And he said it's so when he goes to pierce my nose, like, obviously I won't hit the middle of my nose, because if it did, that would be bad. And so he put that up my nose, and then I grabbed my dad's hand just for like the comfort, and he was like squeezing my hand more than I was squeezing his. It was like that moment, like I'll never forget. It was so cute. And so when he actually did it, he did it with like just a regular needle. There was no gun, no nothing. And I want to say it did not hurt. Like a lot of people are like, oh my god, the nose piercing hurts so bad. For me, it didn't. I had one trickling of blood, and that was it. And I didn't wear a hoop then. I started wearing a hoop probably like 3 years ago. I just got like this really tiny diamond, like just because I was only 12, like almost about to be 12. So I just got like a really small nose ring.
Amber also got 2 guinea pigs named Angela and Jamaica, but they had to return Angela when she got sick. And then she also lost Jamaica in the living room of their trailer and never found her again. Shortly after moving back home, Amber suffered the biggest loss of her childhood. Grandma Judy passed away in a very slow and confronting manner.
The closest person I have ever had in my family is my grandma Judy. She passed away when I was 12, 13, and it was earth-shattering. I have never been put in a position where I honestly felt like I could not live anymore. She was like my mom when my mom couldn't be my mom or didn't want to be my mom or wasn't my mom. My grandma was that for me. She was my actual heart and soul. She treated me as if I was her own, and we just had like this bond that I can't describe. She was very sick for months, and she was hospitalized in San Francisco for months. We lived about 35-40 minutes away from San Francisco. And this was during the time when I always have to explain this because people get kind of confused, which I understand. This was during a trial with my parents to see if they were fit to be parents again because I was in foster care. This whole thing. This whole aspect was happening during that trial. My grandma was in the hospital for months, and we would go visit her up most 5-6 times a week. And every time I saw her, it was getting worse. And I knew it was something with her liver, but as a 12-year-old, they didn't want to tell me much. My parents didn't want to tell me much. So that's all I knew, was that it was something with her liver. And I remember the last day that she was at the hospital, the doctors told us in the room with my grandma, you know, you have about a year to live. And hearing that was like hard to hear, but I was also so happy that she was still gonna have that year. Then the doctor, about an hour later, pulled my dad into the hallway. My grandma was sleeping, and I went out there with my dad, and he said, she actually has about a week. My whole everything, it's so hard to explain. I felt like I blacked out. Obviously I didn't, but I felt like I did. And I just started bawling right in the hallway. And so they sent my grandma home that day, and she got to be on hospice. Why am I sharing this story? I don't know, but I'm gonna keep talking about it. She has been on my mind so much lately. So she got put on hospice, and my mom actually would take care of her while hospice wasn't there, visiting her or whatever. My grandma had a hospital bed in the living room, and oh God, I think it was day 3 that she was home. The last thing that she said to me was I sounded like a chipmunk. Because my bedroom was right next to the living room. We lived in a trailer, so you could hear everything. It was a very small, dingy trailer. And she was in the living room laying down on her bed, and I was eating sunflower seeds in my bed. And she said, "You sound like a chipmunk." And it was cute and it was funny. And
I fell asleep a little bit after that, and the next day I woke up and she was in a coma. My parents told me that hospice induced a coma so she wouldn't be in pain anymore. And every time that my grandma would breathe, you could hear rattling in her lungs. And I think it was 2 nights after she was in a coma. I'm like shaking. I remember telling her it's okay. It was so hard. Like, my parents would always say, just like those 2 days felt like millions of years, you know. But my parents would keep saying, you know, talk to her. She can hear you. And it's just like, I didn't know if I believed it, you know. But everyone was sleeping and I was out there and I just told her it's okay. And the next day I woke up and she wasn't there anymore. Like, her body was, but she wasn't. It was the hardest thing I ever went through. And I ended up missing a couple weeks of school after that because it was so painful. It feels so good to talk about this for some reason.
This reminds me of my grandma so much because when I was a little girl and when she was still alive, she would make tons of chocolate chip cookies for Christmas. This is just a kitchen towel with chocolate chip cookie recipe on it. It's so cute.
I remember watching these with my grandma. I missed you, grandma, so much. Oh my god, she was my life. When I was just a little girl, like I'm talking 7, 8, and I did get scared, but I like enjoyed it. And it wasn't like scared, traumatized scared. It was like scared, I enjoyed it. One day when I was a little girl, there was a really bad storm outside. I'm talking hail and rain and wind that was like shaking the house almost. And my grandma swore up and down that the really big tree by our house and by the car, that it was going to fall on the car. We kept telling her, Grandma, it's not gonna fall on the car, don't you worry. And she was like, nope, I'm going out there and I'm moving the car. She went out there in that crazy wind, that crazy hail, that crazy freaking rain, and she moved the car, and the minute she came back in the house, the tree fell right where the car was. So that was pretty crazy.
So cheers to Grandma Judy, the storm-slaying, cookie-baking lesbian diva. Yes, Grandma Judy was a lesbian, and George was homophobic towards her.
I never knew she was a lesbian. My dad would say things to her when I was younger that I didn't know what it was. I would ask my mom, what does that word mean? What does that mean? And no one would ever tell me.
Yeah, his mom was gay and he used to say a lot of uncalled for things.
After Grandma Judy's passing, Amber's family completely fell apart. In the next video, we'll pick up at age 14 and her journey back into foster care.
My dad was actually homeless, living out of his truck. My mom was living down the street with her boyfriend.